Welcome to the Love, Listen, Talk, Repeat podcast. I'm your host, Wendy Catewell. The topic of each episode is about relationships, the one with ourselves or the relationship with others. So let's get on with this week's episode. Okay, today I've got Julie Cullen with me. She is a career and confidence coach. And I have to say, I did some work with her and it was really great, very helpful. And I think she has got some really good ideas and ways of working with people. And so I'm going to hand you over to Julie. Tell the listeners all about you, Julie, what you do.
Oh, thank you, Wendy. Thank you for that lovely introduction. So my mission in my business is to help women who have fears and have self-doubts and find it difficult to move forward because of these. So my mission is to help them with those, give them tools and strategies to help them deal with those fears and self-doubts so that they can build the career, the business, the life that they love and achieve the dreams and ambitions that they have.
That's really lovely, because I think we can all lose our confidence along the way. I think life events can get in the way, can't they? I think there are either we've had it from childhood, like mine seemed to get knocked quite readily. But then I think being a wife and mother, I think my confidence went because I wasn't in the outside world effectively. I was in this little cocoon of being a mom and somebody's wife. And therefore, I think I wasn't more able to face the outside world as I had been.
Yeah, and I think it's something that a lot of people don't realise is that I talk about it being a journey. Your confidence can ebb and flow. It's not something you're born with or without. You will experience times in your life when you will feel very confident. You will experience others where you lack confidence. And as you mentioned, sometimes you find yourself in a situation where you feel like your confidence has been knocked and you've lost it a little bit. So in my mind, it's you should think about it as a journey, and that there's never going to be, I hate to disappoint anybody, but there's never going to be a moment in time when you are supremely confident in everything that you do and say. There are very, very few people in this world like that. There are a few, but not many. So the reality for most of us is that we will have a journey of peaks and troughs where we feel very confident or we feel low in confidence. And the key is learning what causes it, what's behind it, and then how to deal with it so that you can move forward, so that it doesn't hold you back. To me, that's the key. It's not allowing it to actually hold you back from achieving the things that you want to achieve.
Yeah, because that little voice, that little mind monkey is inside there telling us that, no, you can't do that, that's too scary, or, well, you'll never be any good. I think that often happens to us, doesn't it?
Yes, and it's interesting that you call yours a monkey, and there's so many different words for describing it out there. The monkey, the chimp, the gremlin, the inner critic, a lot of very aggressive sounding words. And actually at the end of this video, this interview, I would like to share a different way of thinking about that voice with your listeners.
Good, that will be great. And I think the other thing that always I notice with confidence is that people can feel really confident in certain situations, but less confident in others. So, for example, they might be very good at their job, in their career, but they lack confidence, say, in a social setting. I always find that quite an interesting one too, because I'm fine when I'm doing what I'm doing, I'm confident in my job, I know it, but when I'm with people, I feel less confident. Does that happen to you as well? Do you see?
Yes, in fact, I had a client earlier this year, and she was exactly the same. She felt reasonably confident in the workplace, but she felt she lacked confidence in herself when she was in not a social setting necessarily, but when she was dealing with her in-laws. So all of a sudden, a different dynamic, a different culture, then she felt uncomfortable in that workplace, in that setting rather. And I think I've also come across people who I've worked with. I remember a woman that I worked with for a very long time when I worked in the corporate world. She was a manager. She's a very strong character, could hold her own in any meetings. I worked in an IT environment, so a very male-dominated environment. She held herself very well in that environment. And very recently, I learned that she avoids networking events because she fears networking events. And so it was really interesting to see that dynamic changing within her because of a change in the setting and the people that she's dealing with.
Yes, it is interesting, isn't it? I think that we can, if we realise that we're confident in one area, then I think that's a good basis to, well, if you can do it there, then yes, you know that you have that confidence within you. It's just how you get over that hurdle that you're struggling with.
Yeah. And I think one of the key things that I teach my clients is that when you feel a lack of confidence, it's a thought process. At the end of the day, it's something that you believe about yourself that leads you to feel lacking confidence in that situation. Just as in a situation where you're confident, it's the thought process that leads you to feel confident. So whether you feel confident or whether you feel lacking confidence, it is a thought process. And if you can understand that and learn to think about that when you get in those situations, and that can be so powerful, because at the end of the day, if your fears are driven by your own thoughts are within your own control. So if you learn the techniques to then deal with those thoughts and change those thoughts into something more empowering, then that helps you get over your lack of confidence. It's all the power to be more confident is within you. Yeah. It's simply learning how to bring that out so you can get the best from yourself.
Great. And that leads me on, because we talked earlier about imposter syndrome, and I thought it was something that I think you're very passionate about helping people with.
Definitely. And so this, one of the biggest fears that a lot of people do have links back to this idea of imposter syndrome, which basically just is a fear of being a fraud in a situation. So you see it a lot in the workplace. And as psychology recognizes this, they call it a psychological pattern in which you doubt your accomplishments. So you have this fear of being exposed as a fraud. You have this feeling that you don't deserve what you've achieved, that somehow you've been lucky or in the right place at the right time, or whatever is behind that doubt that you have. And you feel like you're just waiting for people to find out that actually you're not all that, and that you're not the right person in the right place, that you don't deserve to be there. And it's something that affects a lot of people, men and women. A lot of people associate it with the female population, but in actual fact, science has proven that men suffer from it as well. Maybe just don't talk about it as much as we do. In a lot of surveys that are research that's done, it's anywhere between about 70 to 80% of the working population will experience it at some point in their careers. So it can be quite debilitating if you allow it to be. And it can follow you through your whole career journey. People believe that once people get to an executive level, they no longer feel these fears, but they actually do.
Yeah. Yeah, and so interesting you should say that, because it was reminding me of actually two guys, separate clients. And one, he was going for a new position and he was searching for new jobs. And he said, well, what if I can't? What if I can't do that? Will they find me out? And the other one was a guy as well, and he just started a new job. And he said, what if I don't measure up? What if I don't know everything? And it was all those fears that he was coming up with. They're going to find me out. They're going to find out that I'm a fraud. And he needed frequent one-to-ones with his manager to get that reassurance that he was okay and on the right track.
It's a very interesting thing, because we kind of assume when we're children, and if you have children of your own, anybody listening to this, you know that you as a parent tends to give them reassurance. When they start feeling the doubt, you give them the reassurance. When we move into adulthood, often we don't have that other person giving us the reassurance, because it's believed that once we're adults, we should be able to do that for ourselves. And that's one of the skills that I teach my clients, is how to give yourself that reassurance, that you are capable, you are worthy, you can do that, rather than focusing on what it is that you can't do, or you think you can't do, or you think the gap is that is making you feel like an imposter.
Yes, quite really go along with all of that. I quite agree with you, because in the workplace, we hardly ever get praised. When I was working in the corporate world, you just didn't get that. They would be quick to criticize. And if you ever had, an appraisal or the 360 as it is now, which I've not been involved in, but you don't get necessarily the nice things you're told about. You always get told, well, you could do that better. And therefore, as you say, we've got to find it within us, because you're not necessarily going to get it from other people.
Yeah. And it's an interesting that you point that. I remember being at a particular, it was a training course that I was on. It was for 6 months. And part of that training course was we had to give feedback to each other on our performance. And we were given some great tips on giving feedback. And the one that always sticks in my mind was, you give someone 2 pieces of feedback. One, to say what they did really well. And the second, to let them know how it could have been even better.
Yeah.
So you never criticize them, you never critique them. You just give them some advice on how they could improve it for the next time.
And I think that's so much nicer way to put it, because, but we don't really always hear that, do we? But I think that's so much. As soon as we hear a criticism, we tend to go back to that small child within us who, and we know how bad that felt when we were reprimanded for something. We felt that small anyway. And I think as an adult, we emotionally can go back that small again and feel like that small child, shamed and embarrassed and not good enough and all of those other things.
Yeah. And that's why it's so important to learn how to empower yourself. So don't rely on others to give you the confidence. They may or they may not. They might not because they don't think about it. They might not because they don't know how. They might not have the skills, or they might just be rude individuals who wouldn't even think of giving you some praise. Whatever the reason, it doesn't really matter. You can't control that. But what you can absolutely 100% control is what's going on in your mind. Yeah. So you can choose to focus on why you feel like a fraud. You can choose to focus on why you don't think you fit in, or what gaps you have in your skills that are missing. Or you can choose to focus on the attributes that you bring to the situation. You can focus on what your strengths are. You can focus on what you contribute. You can choose to believe in yourself, regardless of what anybody else says. It is a choice. And once you learn the power of making that choice, it can so uplift you and your confidence levels to such an extent that you no longer, because one of the reasons we feel lack of confidence or lack of self-belief is because we fear what other people think.
Yeah.
Most of the time, that's the driver behind it, is the fear about what other people think. And if you can learn to have the belief in yourself that you are capable, that you are worthy, that you are doing a good job, then what other people think becomes less important to you.
I want to kind of ask you about this one. I had a client who she'd chosen to leave the company, but in fact, she felt that she had no other option. So when this left her feeling completely devastated. So I asked her to start thinking about her achievements. And when she talked about it, because it's a big list and it would go towards her CV for when she was applying for a new job and so on, but okay, what are your achievements? And she started talking about the things that she'd done within that position. And I said, but you've achieved this and you've achieved that. She said, no, that was just doing my job. So I'm just thinking, do you have clients like that? And what do you suggest to them? How would you help them?
Yes, you meet so many people like that. In fact, I was talking to one of my clients just the other day there, and she was sharing some of the skills she has around networking and connecting people. When I pointed out to her that was actually a very valuable skill and that not everyone could do that, she didn't recognize it as a skill. She basically said, but that's just me.
Yeah.
And I think that's what a lot of us do. We don't recognize that some of the simple things that we do that we think are quite easy and we think everyone else can do, They can't necessarily. We take things for granted, and I think it's important to stop taking things for granted and actually recognizing what is it I do, what skills do I have, but also listening to when people praise you for those skills, thank you for those skills. You know, sometimes people come up and maybe say, oh, Wendy, thank you for that. That was really helpful. That was useful. And the other person turns around and says, oh, but if I only had more time, or it could have been better if, or, well, I could have done that a little bit better. And immediately you start to downplay the compliment and the thanks that you just got. Whereas listen to the thanks, say thank you for the person taking the time to appreciate the work that you've done, and then jot it down and try and see from their perspective, what was it that you delivered to them that they were so grateful for? Instead of trying to just play it off as something that's kind of easy and normal for you.
Yeah, I think they're really good tips, actually, really good tips, because people they downplay it constantly. Oh, that was just, and I think we're very bad at taking compliments.
We most definitely are. Something I became conscious of quite a while back. I think I was particularly bad at this as well. And when I realized what I was doing, I started consciously, just saying thank you. In fact, a friend of mine says you should follow that up with thank you, and do you want to tell my manager? if you're working in a corporate environment, which I thought was quite a nice spin on it. But yeah, saying thank you and just leaving it at that, or saying thank you and then following it up. But what was so helpful about that? So you know what the benefit was that the person got. And then when you start to become conscious of it yourself, then you start noticing how many people actually do it, whether it's in the workplace or even just in their personal life. You know, somebody says, oh, I love that top. Oh, this old thing, I've had it for years.
Oh, yeah.
We just aren't good at taking compliments. So if anybody's listening there who can relate to this and knows that they do it themselves, next time someone gives you a compliment at work or personally, just say thank you.
I think that's such a good tip. I always think, well, because I've learned to say that, I'd say thank you. But I actually stop friends or going in that old top and say, well, if I gave you a gift, would you throw it back at me? You go, no. Well, that's what you just received as a gift. It's somebody, a compliment is a gift, actually. And that person has stepped out their comfort zone, maybe, to compliment you. And then you turn around and say, what, this old top? How does that person feel that they actually only appreciate old tops?
I love that. I love the way you think about it as a gift. I think that's such a good tip. I might actually steal that from you, Wendy.
You're very welcome. I will spread it all around.
Yeah, that's a lovely way to think about it. Is somebody's giving you the gift of a compliment, so accept it with grace, the way you would a present.
Yes, yeah. I think this is it, because we are very prone to, oh, well, yes. And I hear it constantly. Say, don't do it. And I refrain from doing it myself. You're right. Because I just feel it puts the other person down. And that's what it feels to me. And if I remember that I'm actually putting someone down in it by disregarding or disrespecting their praise, then, or their thanks, then, I don't want to do that to somebody. But that all still leads into the imposter syndrome, doesn't it? Because that can be part of it. Oh, I don't look good enough. I'm not up to it. All of that other stuff.
Yeah, it's all part of the same. It's to do with your mindset. It's to do with your belief system. There's something inside you that believes to be true what you're thinking in that moment, and it's down to you to then question why you think that way, why you think like that, what is the belief behind that, and how can you replace that with something that's so much more empowering that will give you the confidence to then carry on.
Yeah, and I think that's really, really good to actually, one, challenge those thoughts, and then not just challenge them in your mindset, but actually do something about it.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things I would bring up is I always believed from a child, I think I was at school, and the teachers, they would only concentrate on the top few that they thought that they invested their time with. So the rest of the classes were just the dross. And I just had no art tuition, but we go to an art class, and I believed because you're just left to it, I couldn't paint or draw. I was useless. And it took me a long time to challenge that, because all my life, well, that was the message I took up from that class, that teacher, the school, that I was useless at art. And then eventually I thought, well, you know what, I'm going to learn how to do it. So I took myself to an art class, and I really enjoy it now. I'm not saying that I will ever be a Picasso or a Dali or anything like that, but I can produce some reasonable kind of paintings or drawings that I feel proud of. And I think it's just not, it's challenging it in our mind and then actually taking that step forward and saying, you know what, I can do this, I can have a go.
Yeah, absolutely. And finally, when you use the word "I can't," and what I tend to teach is there's certain giveaways when we have these limiting beliefs about ourselves. One is "I can't." So if you're using "I can't," it's either because you have a limiting belief based on something you experienced, or you're saying "I can't" when you really mean "I won't," "I don't want to."
Yes.
There's "I must" or "I must not."
Yeah.
So rules that you set around yourself. I don't do that. It's like you've decided that's your personality is you don't do that, or it's something that you believe about yourself. So there's different language that we use, and that's one of the things that I teach is to listen to the language that you use and try to understand, did it come from your childhood? Did it come from your experience? Did it come from someone else? Sometimes our own limiting beliefs are based by something someone else has said to us that we've taken on board. And then just question it. I had a client one time who had found herself trapped in this cycle, and she talked about, this, she called it her inner critic, this voice that would tell her that she just couldn't continue. And this went on for a long time. So I challenged her to have a conversation with the voice. People find that a bit odd. I actually have a conversation with the voice. So if the voice is saying, I can't do this, then say, well, why can't you do it? Question it. Why can't I do it? Why do I think I can't do it? Where did that come from? Why am I thinking that I have that limitation? And have the conversation. And so she went through this conversation with herself and realized what her fear was, realized it was down to an injury that she'd had actually. So she was actually trying to train for a marathon, a half marathon. And so it was down to an injury that she had this fear of then reintroducing that injury. But when she had the conversation with herself and realized that, I don't need to feel that anymore. She also recognized that there was another thing going on around just she was losing the motivation. So then she found ways of introducing motivation that would keep her going. And it's just recognizing where that voice is coming from.
Yeah.
And then understanding it and then thinking about what are the decisions you can make, the beliefs that you can change, the actions that you can take that will move you into a different belief system. It doesn't happen overnight. It's not easy. Some of your belief systems have been there for a very long time. You just mentioned one that was from your childhood. So these are beliefs that we've had for a long, long time. So to transition to a new belief system is difficult. I'm not trying to say that it's easy. But if you don't start the process, then you never get there and you just continue to hold yourself back.
Absolutely. As you say, if we've learned something over decades, it's not going to be changed in a few weeks. And I think there is something about the reality of that. You've held that belief for X number of years. Do you really believe that you're going to change it in 2 or 3 weeks? No, you're not. Be kind to yourself, but you can start the process.
Yeah, and it's a process. So whenever I talk about any of my programs, I talk about a confidence journey. I actually intentionally make my program 12 weeks long, so that I take people on a journey. Some people get results quite quickly. That's very inspiring. Some people in the middle of the journey, and some people it's right towards the end, and they start to worry that they can't change. But again, it's just dealing with that limiting belief, keeping the momentum going, and at some point there's a tipping point where you start to notice a change. It might be slight, but you start to notice a change in your thinking, a change in your behavior, and a change in the way you believe in yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is very, very sound advice, because I think we can be, when we've got that inner critic in our heads, then we will say, well, why can't I change that? Why can't I change it now? And so on. And then people don't tend to recognise that, and they could be really, really hard on themselves, especially if they're their own hard taskmaster, aren't they?
Absolutely. And I mean, I was talking about it just last week. I was hosting a workshop at an event, and I was talking about imposter syndrome. And so I'm sitting at the back of the room waiting for the other speakers to finish and waiting for my turn. And I felt my imposter syndrome starting to bubble up. The thoughts going in my head about, this was the largest audience I'd ever spoken in front of. There was an executive up there on the audio platform speaking about her career, and she'd had an amazing career. There was all these women sitting in the room listening avidly to her, and I'm thinking, oh, I'm up next. Yeah. And I could feel that kind of starting to bubble up. But again, knowing what I know, I sort of had that conversation to myself, reminded myself that I'd prepared for this workshop. I'd run it before. I knew what I wanted to talk about. I knew the emotions and the feelings that I wanted people to get from the situation and taking part in the workshop. And all it was a slightly bigger audience. That was all that was different. Yeah. And just having that conversation. And that's one of the things that I like to get across to people is that I coach confidence, but doesn't mean that say that I never feel a lack of confidence or I never doubt myself. It's just that I've learned strategies and techniques to help myself when it starts to show itself and when my voice starts.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, this has been really interesting. I think we could talk for ages. I'm just thinking now, and maybe we will, maybe another subject, because I think this is really interesting and I hope the audience really enjoying it. What is one thing that people could take away now? One tip that they could just start putting into action?
One of the things that I teach is about this voice. That's what I spend a lot of time talking about. And we mentioned before, people call it a critic, a gremlin, a monkey, a chimp, a crow, whatever it is, which I think all sounds very negative. It sounds like something you've got to go into battle against, right, which I don't think is particularly helpful personally. So whenever I'm talking about it, I ask people to think of that voice as their friend in need. And the reason I say that is, if you were in a situation and you were talking to a friend or a colleague, a son or a daughter, and they started saying some of the negative things that you've been saying to yourself, you would not agree with them. You would instinctively, especially with your children, try to reassure them that they are capable, that they are worthy, that they can do whatever it is they're trying to do and finding difficult. You would encourage them. And that's what you need to do for yourself. You need to listen to that voice. I get some people to write it out, what the voice is saying to them, what your voice is saying to you. And I say, when your voice starts feeling that self-doubt, think of her as your friend in need. And what would you say to her? That's what you need to say to yourself. And again, if it helps to write it out, then write a letter to yourself. Tell yourself how wonderful and worthy you are. Find all the evidence as to why you would say that to yourself, just like you would do if you were talking to a friend.
That's really great. I love that. And I think, yes, I sometimes see that little monkey as being mischievous rather than being my enemy, but it's playing naughty tricks on me. And I think sometimes just changing that or saying, okay, you're being mischievous, but how can you help me instead?
How can I give you a little hug and tell you it's going to be okay?
Exactly. Because that's what we need at that point. You're right, so much. Okay, so I've loved talking to you today. How can people get in touch with you? An easy way, because I will put all the details in the show notes, but if listeners are, they're on the hoof or something, what's an easy way of getting in touch with you, Julie?
So my favourite place is in my Facebook group. So I have a community online where it's women only. Sorry, any gentlemen watching or listening to this, but it's a women's only community. And I've developed that because I want to help and support, and I want all of us to help and support each other. So it's full of lots of different ladies from lots of different backgrounds, whether you're in full-time employment, part-time employment, self-employed, running your own business, doing a bit of all of the above. It's just a place where we can all get together and help and support each other. So it's on Facebook. It's called Awesome Ambitious Career Women. And I would love to see some of you join me there.
Okay, so Awesome Ambitious Career Women.
Yes.
Right, on Facebook. Thank you, Julie. It's been absolutely delightful and really enjoyed it today. I hope the listeners have too.
It's been a pleasure, Wendy. Thank you so much for having me.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you'd like to know more about me, go to my website, wendykatewell.co.uk, where you can find out about my services and how to contact me. Until next time, bye!